You know that old saying, right? Everything's bigger in Texas. Well, it's not just about the 10-gallon hats or the endless highways. We're talking about fortunes. Massive, generational fortunes that have been quietly, pulling the strings in the Lone Star State for decades. So forget the flashy headlines about today's billionaires. We're going to dive deep into the world of Texas's real old money.
So what is Texas old money, really? I mean, we're not talking about the tech billionaires you read about every day. No, no. We're pulling back the curtain on these dynasties whose power, well, it's not just about the zeros in their bank account. It's about decades, sometimes a century of quiet behind-the-scenes influence.
Yeah, at its core, it's all about legacy. It's wealth that's not just made, but sustained and grown over generations. A lot of it started with those classic Texas industries, right? You guessed it, oil. But the really smart ones, they took that oil money and evolved it into something so much bigger.
All right, let's get into it. We're going to kick off our countdown with the first group of families. Now, these fortunes, they represent a more modern path to power, but it's still, distinctly Texan.
Kicking things off at number 10, we've got the Perot family. And right away, we're breaking the mold. This is a dynasty built not on that black gold pulled from the ground, but on the future, on information technology. So the family's matriarch, Margot Perot, her estimated net worth, a cool $5.3 billion. And get this, that's just the baseline. That's what it takes to even get your foot in the door on this list. Just incredible. The story of the patriarch, Ross Perot, is legendary. He was a classic Texas maverick. He was working at IBM, right? And he has this brilliant idea, hey, we should sell data processing services, not just the computers. IBM basically laughed him out of the room. So what does he do? He takes a $1,000 loan from his wife, starts his own company, EDS, and then sells it to General Motors for $2.5 billion. But wait, he's not done. He turns around and does the exact same thing again with Perot Systems, selling that one to Dell for almost $4 billion. The guy was a machine.
And of course, you probably remember him from his wild independent presidential runs in the 90s, right? He was the guy with the charts and the pointer, captivating millions with that famous line about the giant sucking sound of jobs going south. A true, one-of-a-kind character.
All right, coming in at number 9, we've got a name that, if you're a football fan in Houston, you know very well. This is a family whose fortune was absolutely cemented in one single massive energy deal. We're talking about the McNair family. The matriarch Janice McNair, who's the principal owner of the Houston Texans, well, she holds an estimated net worth of $6.2 billion. And that fortune, by the way, makes her the wealthiest woman in all of American sports. How about that?
And how they got there? Wow. The story of Bob McNair is pure Texas strategy. So he builds up the country's largest private power company, Cogent Technologies. And then, and you have to appreciate the timing here, he sells it to Enron. Yeah, that Enron, for $1.5 billion in 1999, right before their historic, infamous collapse. He takes that massive windfall and uses it to fulfill his dream, bringing an NFL team back to Houston.
Okay, next up at number 8, this is a family that built an absolute empire by controlling the flow of a different kind of hot commodity. We're not talking oil this time, we're talking cars. Say hello to the Friedkin family. Yeah, their incredible $7.8 billion fortune, it was all built on one single masterful deal. An exclusive contract for cars that the patriarch, Thomas Friedkin, struck decades and decades ago. The strategy was it was simple but absolutely genius. I want you to picture this. It's 1969. American muscle cars are king. And Thomas Friedkin makes this incredibly bold bet on a brand that, back then, nobody was really paying attention to, Toyota. He locked up the exclusive rights to distribute Toyotas in 5 southern states. So he controlled the entire pipeline, from the port right to the dealership. And as Toyota's popularity just exploded, well, he had created a literal money printing machine. His son Dan has taken that fortune now and expanded it into, luxury hotels, Oscar-nominated movies, and he even owns a major European soccer club. Just wild. And number 7, we're heading to Fort Worth. This is a dynasty that basically perfected the art of taking inherited oil money and turning it into an even bigger fortune through some incredibly shrewd investments. We're talking about the Bass family.
So you've got the 4 Bass brothers. They took their inheritance and leveraged it into a collective fortune of well over $10 billion. I mean,
That's just a testament to their financial genius, plain and simple.
But their story really starts with their great-uncle, the legendary wildcatter Sid Richardson. He was a classic Texas oilman. While everyone else was chasing the boom over in East Texas, he went the other way. He went west and struck it big, discovering the massive Keystone oil field. That discovery laid the foundation for generations of wealth. And the Bass brothers? They took that wealth and became some of the most feared and respected investors in all of America.
Okay, we are now entering the next tier of wealth. This is where things get really interesting. These are the iconic empires, the families whose names are basically institutions in the state of Texas. And at number 6, we have a family behind a truly beloved Texas institution. This is an empire built not on Wall Street, but right in the aisles of your local grocery store. It's the Butt family, the owners of the one and only H-E-B.
Just think about this for a second. This company started back in 1905 with a tiny $60 investment from the founder, Florence Butt. And from that $60, it has grown into a family fortune worth $18.8 billion. That is just an incredible story. Okay, coming in at number 5. This is it. This is the dynasty that is the absolute benchmark for Texas old money. Founded by the iconic wildcatter H.L. Hunt, this is, without a doubt, probably the most legendary old money family in all of Texas. So H.L. Hunt himself made an absolutely unimaginable fortune from the East Texas oil field. But it's what his sons did with it that's so fascinating. They went in wildly different directions. You have Lamar, who was a total sports visionary. He founded the American Football League and even coined the term Super Bowl. Then you have his brothers, Nelson and William. They were high-stakes gamblers. They famously tried to corner the entire world's silver market. It was a spectacular gamble that for a moment looked like it might work, before it all came crashing down in bankruptcy. All right, our number 4 spot goes to a dynasty that really represents the new guard of energy titans. See, they didn't make their fortune from drilling for oil. Nope, they made it by owning the plumbing, the pipelines, the infrastructure of the entire industry. Let's talk about the Duncan family. So the family's net worth is a colossal $37 billion. And there's a really fascinating story behind a big chunk of that. The patriarch, Dan Duncan, he passed away in 2010. Now, what's so special about 2010? Well, it just happened to be the one single year where there was a temporary lapse in the federal estate tax. Talk about timing. This allowed his 4 children to inherit his $10 billion estate completely 100% tax-free. Okay, here we go. We've made it to the final section. The top 3. These are the families whose wealth and power operate on a truly global scale. We're in the stratosphere now. Starting off, the top 3 is an intensely private Dallas dynasty. And they're a perfect example of how sometimes the greatest power is the power you never, ever see. We're talking about the Marshall family. So where does their massive $28.3 billion fortune come from? Well, primarily from a 16% stake in Koch Industries, one of the biggest privately held companies in America. This incredibly valuable piece of the pie was acquired decades ago by the patriarch, J. Howard Marshall II. And now for our number 2 spot. This is a family whose massive but very quiet oil fortune absolutely exploded onto the public scene with one of the biggest deals in recent Texas history. Let's talk about the Stevens-Greet family. Okay, so for years, the patriarch, Autry Stevens, just quietly went about his business, building Endeavor Energy into one of the largest private oil producers in the entire country. And then, in 2024, came the deal of a lifetime. He sold the company for a staggering $26 billion. Think about that. In an instant, a fortune that was tied up in oil rigs and land was converted into cold, hard cash. This created one of the most liquid, and therefore one of the most powerful, family fortunes in the entire state overnight. And finally, at number 1, we're not talking about a family, but a single individual, the single wealthiest person in all of Texas. She's an heir to the largest family fortune in American history, and she's made the Lone Star State her home. Of course, we're talking about Alice Walton. Her personal net worth, it soars past $100 billion. $100 billion. Alice Walton, the daughter of Walmart founder Sam Walton, she's in a league completely of her own. It's interesting because while her brothers were running the massive Walmart retail empire, Alice went a different route. She focused on finance and, more importantly, her true passion, art. And from her huge, sprawling ranch in Texas, she personally orchestrated the creation of the Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art. We're talking hundreds of millions of her own money poured into building this world-class institution, and it has one simple, powerful mission: make great art accessible to everyone. And the best part? Admission is always, always free. So, wow, after that journey through Texas's most powerful families, what's the big takeaway here? What does all this wealth and power really mean? Well, if you look back, you can see a few core themes that connect pretty much all of these dynasties, right? You've got that evolution, moving from just straight up oil wildcatting to these huge, diversified global empires. You've got the immense influence of their philanthropy, which really shapes public life. And maybe the biggest one of all, the strategic value they place on privacy and having a long-term vision, a vision that spans generations. And that really brings us to a final and pretty crucial question. These families, they've built and sustained wealth on a scale that's frankly almost impossible for most of us to even comprehend. So if we agree that wealth is the power to build the future, you have to ask, what future are these dynasties building for Texas, and by extension, for the rest of us?